On a scorching summer day, an ordinary lemonade stand becomes the center of an unexpected storm. What starts as a simple hustle quickly turns into a test of courage when danger rolls in on roaring engines. Will justice prevail, or will the strong prey on the weak? Stay until the end to witness a moment that will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful stories. The midday sun hung high in the sky, casting shimmering waves of heat over the sprawling city park. The air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and melting asphalt, mingling with the distant laughter of children playing near a shaded playground. Birds chirped lazily from the branches of towering oaks, their melodies drowned out by the occasional whir of passing bicycles and the steady hum of conversation from park visitors enjoying the summer afternoon. It was the kind of day where people sought relief in any form of shade or a refreshing cold drink. Near a well-worn path, just a few steps from a bubbling fountain where children splashed their hands in the cool water, stood a small but neatly arranged lemonade stand. The wooden structure was decorated with bright yellow and white fabric, its striped awning fluttering slightly in the occasional warm breeze. A hand-painted sign, carefully outlined with precise strokes, read, "Fresh Lemonade $1," in bold, cheerful letters. The stand itself was meticulously organized, with neatly stacked cups, a clear plastic pitcher filled with ice-cold lemonade, and a modest cash box resting beside it. Behind the stand sat an 11-year-old girl named Nia, her hands resting confidently on the counter as she awaited her next customer. Unlike the other kids running around the park, she wasn't playing. She was working. Her bright brown eyes scanned the passing crowd with quiet determination, her lips pressing into a firm line each time someone walked by without stopping. The scorching heat didn't seem to bother her, nor did the occasional skeptical glance from adults who were surprised to see a child running a business alone. She was used to that. Nia wasn't just any kid. She was a girl in a wheelchair. Her slender arms rested on the wheels of her chair, which was sleek and well-maintained, a necessity for someone who had learned long ago that she had to rely on it for everything. Her dark curly hair was tied into two puffed ponytails, giving her a youthful, vibrant look, though her expression was far more serious than that of most kids her age. Her red t-shirt, slightly oversized, had the words "Dream Big" printed across the front. A man in his 60s, dressed in a casual short-sleeve button-up shirt and khaki shorts, approached the stand, fishing a dollar bill from his pocket as he smiled down at her. "1 lemonade, please," he said warmly, placing the bill on the counter. Nia's face brightened as she swiftly reached for a cup, expertly pouring the golden liquid from the pitcher. "Thank you, Mr. Harris," she said, handing him the drink with both hands. The man took a sip, sighing in satisfaction. "Perfect on a day like this," he said, nodding approvingly. "Still saving up." Nia straightened her posture with pride. "I've got $380 so far." Mr. Harris raised his eyebrows, clearly impressed. "That's a solid start," he said, taking another sip. "You're really serious about this, huh?" "I am," she said firmly. "I want to open a sports center for kids like me, a place where we can actually train, compete, and play, just like everyone else." Harris nodded, admiring her determination. "You know, most kids your age are just thinking about summer vacations and video games." Nia shrugged. "That's fine for them, but I have bigger plans." Harris chuckled and gave her an encouraging nod before walking off with his lemonade. As the afternoon went on, Nia continued her work, carefully pouring drinks, greeting customers with her confident yet professional demeanor, and tucking each bill neatly into her white cash box. Despite her young age, she ran her stand with the discipline of someone twice her age. She had no time for distractions. Then came the voice she had been hoping for. "Hey, young lady, how's the lemonade today?" Nia looked up and immediately felt her breath catch in her throat. Two enormous men stood before her, their presence impossible to ignore. Dwayne Johnson and John Cena. Her eyes widened as she stared at them, her mouth opening slightly in awe. "No way," she whispered under her breath. Dwayne grinned down at her. "Yep, it's really us." John chuckled. "So, are you going to tell us about your lemonade, or are we just supposed to guess how good it is?" Nia shook herself out of her daze, straightening up in her chair. Yes, best lemonade in town. Guaranteed." Dwayne nodded approvingly. "I like the confidence. All right, we'll take 2 cups." Nia worked quickly, making sure to pour the perfect servings. She handed them their drinks, watching as both men took a sip. John let out a satisfied sigh. "All right, kid, you weren't lying. That's some solid lemonade." Dwayne smiled. Definitely worth the stop. As he reached into his pocket for payment, his fingers brushed against a thick wad of crisp $100 bills. He hesitated for only a second before pulling out 10 of them. He placed them on the counter, gently tapping the stack. "Here's $10,000. Nia blinked, sure she had misheard him. "Wait, what?" John smiled. "This isn't charity, kid. It's an investment in your future." Her hands trembled slightly as she reached out, touching the stack as if expecting it to disappear. I can't take this. It's too much." Dwayne leaned in, his voice warm but firm. "Listen, you already have the kind of determination and drive that most people only find later in life. You've earned this by working hard and setting your goals early. We're just giving you a little boost." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. This is going to change everything for me and my mom." John patted her shoulder. "Just promise us one thing." Nia looked up, still in disbelief. "What?" Dwayne smiled. "One day, when you've made it, find someone else who needs help and do the same for them." She nodded quickly. "I promise." John finished his lemonade in one final gulp. "Well, that's the best drink I've had in a long time." Dwayne nodded in agreement. Definitely worth the stop. As they turned to continue their jog, Nia clutched the money tightly to her chest, her heart pounding. She had started this stand with a small dream, but now, with this help, her future had suddenly expanded beyond what she ever imagined. Dwayne and John jogged away, feeling good about their decision, but before they got too far, the distant roar of motorcycle engines echoed down the street. The peaceful atmosphere of the park suddenly shifted. Neither of them had any idea that trouble was about to follow. The sun continued its relentless assault on the city park, baking the pavement and casting long shadows from the trees. The faint sound of birds chirping was soon drowned out by the growing rumble of motorcycle engines in the distance. Nia, still gripping the stack of money that Dwayne Johnson and John Cena had just given her, felt her stomach tighten at the sound. The roar grew louder, and a moment later, 6 large motorcycles rumbled onto the pathway near her stand, their riders slowing as they pulled up in an intimidating half-circle. The men on the bikes were rough-looking, their leather jackets worn from years of use, their arms covered in tattoos. The leader of the group, a tall, bald man with a thick beard and a deep scar running down his forehead, cut the engine of his bike and leaned forward. His expression was one of amused curiosity as he scanned the lemonade stand before letting his gaze settle on Nia. Well, he drawled, his voice carrying an edge of condescension. "What do we have here? A little entrepreneur." Nia stiffened but kept her posture strong. She had dealt with rude customers before, but something about these men made her uneasy. Still, she wouldn't let them see her fear. "Lemonade is $1 per cup," she said firmly, trying to keep her voice even. Another biker, a burly man with a jagged scar across his cheek, scoffed. $1? For some watered-down sugar juice? Sounds like a rip-off. The others chuckled, their laughter dripping with mockery. The bald leader nudged his handlebars slightly. "Tell you what, sweetheart, why don't we do this another way? You give us a round of lemonade and we decide if it's worth paying for." Nia felt her pulse quicken. "That's not how it works. You drink, you pay," she said, her grip tightening on the edge of the counter. A few of the bikers raised their eyebrows, clearly entertained by her defiance. One of them, a lanky man with a missing front tooth, grabbed a cup himself and filled it from the pitcher. He took a slow sip, smacking his lips obnoxiously before grinning. "Tastes like garbage." He turned the cup over and dumped the lemonade onto the ground, the yellow liquid splattering onto the pavement. The other bikers erupted into laughter as Nia clenched her fists in frustration. "You owe me $1?" she said through gritted teeth. The bald leader's smirk widened. "And what if I don't feel like paying, huh?" He gestured toward his group. "You think a little girl in a wheelchair is going to make us?" Another biker casually took a cup and drank from it before tossing the empty container onto the ground. "I've had better," he muttered. "That's $2 you owe," Nia pressed, refusing to back down. The bald biker tilted his head, his grin unwavering. "You've got guts, kid. I'll give you that." His gaze flicked past her, toward the back of the stand where something caught his attention. His smirk twisted into something darker. "Well, well, what do we have here?" One of the bikers stepped off his bike and moved toward the stand. Nia instinctively turned, following his gaze, and her stomach dropped when she realized what they had seen. The stack of money, the $10,000 that John Cena and Dwayne Johnson had given her, was still sitting behind the counter, partially concealed but still visible. The wiry biker with a patchy beard and fingerless gloves whistled. "Damn, kid, you making bank selling lemonade, or did you swipe this from Mommy's purse?" Nia's heart pounded, but she kept her face composed. "I didn't steal anything," she shot back. "Two men bought lemonade and gave me a tip." The bikers exchanged looks before bursting out laughing. One of them wiped a fake tear from his eye. "Oh, that's rich. You expect us to believe some random guys just dropped 10 grand on lemonade?" "I don't care what you believe," Nia said, her voice unwavering. The bald leader's grin faded slightly. He stepped forward, towering over her. "Tell you what," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Since you're doing so well, how about we help you out? We'll take this off your hands and make sure it's spent properly." He reached past her toward the stack of money. Nia reacted instantly. She slammed both hands down onto the pile, gripping the cash tightly. "No," his expression darkened. "You don't want to do that, kid." Her hands clenched even tighter around the money. "Get your hands off my money," she said, her voice like steel. For a moment, there was silence. The bikers looked at each other as if deciding what to do next. Then, the bald biker exhaled sharply through his nose and let out a slow chuckle. "Brave," he muttered. "Stupid, but brave." One of the bikers, clearly eager to escalate things, took a step closer. "Maybe we ought to teach her a little lesson in respect." Nia braced herself, her mind racing for a way out. Then a shadow fell over the stand. A deep, powerful voice rang out, cutting through the tension like a blade. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The bikers froze. Nia turned her head slightly, her breath catching in her throat. Standing behind the bikers, their massive frames radiating an unmistakable aura of dominance, were Dwayne Johnson and John Cena. Their eyes were locked onto the group, their expressions unreadable but charged with barely restrained intensity. The bikers turned, sizing up the two men who had suddenly appeared. The bald leader's smirk returned, but there was something different in his eyes now. "Well, well," he mused, crossing his arms. "Look what we have here." John Cena cracked his neck, then his knuckles. "Yeah, look what we have here." Dwayne's gaze dropped briefly to the pile of money, then back to the bikers. His voice was calm, almost amused. "I don't think that cash belongs to you, boys." The tension in the air thickened. Nia, still gripping her money, took a shaky breath. She wasn't alone anymore. The real fight was about to begin. The air was thick with tension as the six bikers turned their full attention to the two towering figures standing before them. Dwayne Johnson and John Cena didn't move. Their stances were relaxed, but unmistakably firm. Their presence alone sending a ripple of unease through the group, though none of the bikers wanted to be the first to admit it. The bald leader took a slow step forward, his smirk returning as he folded his arms across his broad chest. "Well, well," he said, sizing them up. "Two big boys out for a stroll. You guys lost?" John Cena tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "We're exactly where we need to be." Dwayne's gaze flickered down to Nia, who still gripped her money with both hands, her knuckles white. He looked back up at the bald biker, his voice calm but firm. "That cash doesn't belong to you." The bald man chuckled. "Yeah? And what makes you think it belongs to her?" "Because we gave it to her," John said simply. A few of the bikers exchanged looks, shifting slightly on their feet. The weight in John's voice left no room for doubt. The leader, however, refused to let his confidence waver. His smirk twisted into something more predatory. "That right? You two just handed a little girl 10 grand, and I'm supposed to believe that? You can believe whatever you want," Dwayne said, his voice dropping a degree colder. "But you're not taking that money." The leader clicked his tongue, shaking his head. "Now, that's where we disagree. See, my guys and I were just having a friendly conversation with the kid here. We noticed a whole lot of cash sitting out in the open, and, well, we wouldn't want it falling into the wrong hands." "It already has," John muttered. The smirk twitched on the leader's face. "You sure you want to do this, boys? There's 6 of us and only 2 of you." Dwayne exhaled sharply through his nose, as if disappointed. "You guys should really learn how to count." Before the bikers could process what he meant, Dwayne took one deliberate step forward. The sheer shift in energy sent a wave of unease through the group. The leader clenched his jaw, taking a step back on instinct before catching himself. His pride wouldn't let him show weakness. One of the bikers, a thick-set man with a beard like steel wool, squared his shoulders and spat on the ground. "I say we teach these two a lesson." The leader hesitated for a fraction of a second, then let out a short laugh. "Yeah, I think you're right." The moment the words left his mouth, the tension snapped like a pulled wire. The largest of the bikers lunged at Dwayne first, swinging a fist the size of a hammer. But before the punch could land, Dwayne shifted his weight, sidestepping smoothly and driving a devastating elbow into the man's ribs. A loud crack filled the air as the biker staggered backward, wheezing. Another came at John from the side, but Cena reacted in an instant. He ducked the wild swing and countered with a brutal uppercut, sending the biker stumbling backward into the stand. The lemonade pitcher tipped over, spilling its contents onto the wooden surface, but the girl hardly noticed. She was too busy watching in awe. The third biker hesitated but decided to attack anyway. He grabbed a metal chair from the side of the stand and swung it toward Dwayne's head. But Dwayne caught it mid-air with one hand, holding it effortlessly before yanking it away and tossing it aside. Before the biker could react, Dwayne grabbed him by the collar and delivered a crushing spine buster onto the grass. The ground trembled from the impact. The lanky biker, with the missing front tooth, thought he saw an opening and rushed at John with a rusted chain in hand. Cena let him get close enough before catching the chain mid-swing, yanking it forward and flipping the man over his shoulder in a flawless judo throw. The biker hit the pavement with a grunt, the chain clattering beside him. The last two hesitated, now their confidence shaken. The bald leader, however, wasn't ready to back down. His face twisted with rage as he pulled a switchblade from his pocket and flicked it open with a sharp click. "All right, that's enough," he growled, pointing the blade at Dwayne. John tensed slightly, but Dwayne remained eerily calm. His eyes locked onto the blade for a moment before flicking back up to the biker's face. "Bad idea," Dwayne warned. The leader let out a snarl and lunged, but he never made it close. With almost effortless speed, Dwayne sidestepped and caught the biker's wrist in an iron grip. A pained grunt escaped the man as Dwayne squeezed, forcing his fingers to loosen. The knife clattered to the ground. Dwayne then yanked the biker forward and slammed him chest first against the lemonade stand. The entire wooden structure rattled under the force. The leader gasped, struggling to push himself up, but before he could, John was there, grabbing him by the collar. "You know," John mused, lifting the man off the counter effortlessly, "I was really hoping for more of a challenge." He turned and flung the biker onto the sidewalk, where he landed with a hard thud. The remaining bikers scrambled to their feet, groaning in pain, but no longer eager to fight. Dwayne and John stood firm, their expressions unreadable, but the unspoken message was clear. The fight was over. The leader rolled onto his side, coughing, his face red with humiliation. He looked at his men, now scattered and battered, then back at the two men who had just dismantled them without breaking a sweat. He clenched his fist, but knew it was pointless. "Get on your bikes," he rasped. His men didn't need to be told twice. One by one, they staggered toward their motorcycles, some limping, others clutching their ribs. The engines roared back to life as they mounted their seats, their movements shaky but hurried. The leader gave one last burning glare toward Dwayne and John. "This ain't over," he spat. John smirked. "Yeah, it is." Without another word, the bikers revved their engines and sped off down the road, disappearing round the corner. Silence settled over the street. Nia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Dwayne turned to her, his expression softening. "You okay?" She nodded, her grip on the money finally relaxing. Yeah, I think so." John leaned against the counter, glancing at the remnants of the knocked-over lemonade stand. "Sorry about your stand." Nia shook her head quickly. "It's fine. I can rebuild it." Dwayne smiled. "That's the right attitude." John clapped his hands together. "Well, that was a good warm-up." Dwayne chuckled. "Yeah, now let's clean this up." Together, they began helping her restore the stand. The air was no longer filled with tension, but something lighter. The fight was over. But something told Nia that this moment would stay with her forever. The neighborhood had returned to its usual peaceful state, as if the chaos of the past few minutes had never happened. The distant roar of the bikers' motorcycles had faded completely, leaving only the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional chirp of birds in the background. Nia still gripped the edge of her lemonade stand, her small fingers tightening as she tried to process everything that had just happened. The pile of cash was still there, untouched, a reminder of the dangerous moment she had barely escaped. Dwayne Johnson bent down and started picking up the scattered cups and pieces of wood from the stand that had been knocked loose during the scuffle. John Cena grabbed the overturned pitcher and set it upright, brushing some dirt off the table. Nia watched them for a moment before blinking as if snapping out of a trance and quickly stepping forward to help. "You don't have to do that," she said, her voice still carrying the slight tremble of adrenaline. Dwayne looked up at her with a reassuring smile. "Sure we do. We can't just walk away and leave this mess." John nodded in agreement as he started stacking the plastic cups back into a neat pile. "Besides, you stood your ground against those guys. That took guts. The least we can do is help put things back in order." Nia hesitated, then gave a small nod and bent down to pick up the lid of a fallen container. For the first few moments, they worked in silence. The damage wasn't severe, but it was enough to be frustrating. One of the wooden legs of the stand had a deep scratch from where a biker had slammed into it, and a few of the signs were bent. Nothing that couldn't be fixed, but enough to make it clear that trouble had been there. As they worked, Dwayne glanced over at Nia, noticing how she kept stealing quick looks at the pile of money as if expecting it to disappear at any moment. He wiped his hands on his shorts and leaned slightly against the counter. "So," he said casually, "this really for college?" She looked up, surprised by the sudden question. "Yeah," she said, straightening. "I know I'm still young, but I don't want to wait until it's too late to start saving. My mom works so hard, and I don't want her to worry about how she's going to pay for my school when the time comes. If I can start now, maybe I can make a real difference by the time I'm older." John smiled, clearly impressed. "That's pretty smart. Most kids your age are just thinking about summer vacations and video games." She shrugged. "I guess I just see things differently. If I want to change my future, I have to start now." Dwayne nodded approvingly. "That's a strong mindset. Not a lot of people, no matter how old they are, think that far ahead." Nia hesitated for a second, then glanced between the two men. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," John said. She took a deep breath. "Why did you help me? I mean, you didn't have to. Those guys were dangerous. You could have just walked away." Dwayne exchanged a quick glance with John before responding. "Because it was the right thing to do." John leaned against the counter. "Look, we've both been in a lot of fights. In the ring, sure, but also in life. And one thing we've learned is that when you see someone being treated unfairly, you step in. You don't just stand by and let it happen." Dwayne nodded. "You were standing up for yourself. You didn't back down, even when they tried to intimidate you. That's not something we see every day. You earned that money fair and square, and no one had the right to take it from you." Nia looked down at the counter, processing their words. After a few seconds, she gave a small smile. "Thanks. Not just for stopping them, but for believing in me." John smiled. "Hey, you believed in yourself first. That's what matters." They finished tidying up, and soon the stand looked almost as good as new. Nia adjusted one of the signs, making sure it was straight before stepping back to admire their work. Dwayne took a deep breath, looking around the street to make sure the trouble was truly gone. "So," John said, stretching his arms behind his head, "I think that settles it. You're back in business." Nia nodded. "Yeah, thanks to you guys." Dwayne smiled. "And thanks to you. You handled yourself pretty well back there." She grinned. Well, if you ever need another lemonade, you know where to find me." John chuckled. "I might just take you up on that." Dwayne clapped his hands together. "All right. We should probably get going before we distract you from your empire building." Nia giggled. "Yeah, I've got a business to run." She reached under the counter and pulled out 2 fresh cups. "Here, on the house." Dwayne and John exchanged amused looks before each taking a cup. They lifted them in a small toast before taking a sip. The lemonade was just as refreshing as the first time, the perfect end to the chaos of the afternoon. John set his empty cup down and gave her a nod. "Keep working hard, kid. You're going places." Dwayne patted the counter. "And don't forget, one day, when you've made it, help someone else the way we helped you today." Nia held the cup to her chest, her expression turning thoughtful. "I promise." With that, the 2 men turned and began jogging down the street, resuming the run they had started earlier. Nia watched them go, the weight of their words settling into her mind. She had started this lemonade stand with a simple goal, but today had changed everything. She had faced real danger, stood her ground, and found unexpected allies who had reminded her of something important. She wasn't just saving for college, she was building a future. And one day, she would make sure to pass that same kindness forward. The street was quiet again, but Nia still felt the lingering effects of everything that had happened. She stood behind her lemonade stand, looking at the stack of money she had fought so hard to protect. It was still hard to believe that 2 complete strangers, Dwayne Johnson and John Cena, no less, had not only defended her, but also believed in her dreams enough to support them. She replayed their words in her head. The ones about standing up for herself and paying kindness forward when the time came. Those words meant more than any amount of money. Dwayne and John were already a block away, their steady jog taking them further down the street. They hadn't said much after leaving the stand, but both of them were still thinking about the encounter. They had stopped for a simple lemonade break, but it had turned into something far more significant. John glanced at Dwayne. "You ever think about how the smallest decisions end up being the most important?" Dwayne smirked. "All the time." They continued running, letting the rhythm of their footsteps fill the space between them. The day was still hot, but the shade of the trees lining the sidewalk made the temperature a little more bearable. They were just about to turn a corner when a distant but familiar sound made them slow down. The deep, throaty growl of motorcycle engines. John exhaled sharply. "You've got to be kidding me." Dwayne stopped jogging and turned his head slightly, listening. The sound was coming from behind them, growing louder by the second. He exchanged a quick look with John. They didn't need to say anything. They both knew what this meant. Back at the lemonade stand, Nia had just finished stacking her cups when she heard it too. Her stomach tightened. She turned her head slowly, dreading what she would see. The 6 bikers were back. They came roaring down the street, the leader in front, his jaw clenched and his eyes burning with anger. The other 5 trailed closely behind him, their motorcycles rolling to a stop directly in front of the stand. The leader cut the engine, swinging one leg off his bike and standing up. The others followed suit, each one stepping forward in a silent show of intimidation. Nia felt her hands start to tremble, but she quickly clenched them into fists. She wasn't going to show fear. Not again. The low rumble of motorcycles echoed through the street as the 6 bikers pulled up once again, their faces hardened with anger and bruised egos. The bald leader, his jaw clenched tightly, dismounted first, his boots crunching against the pavement as he stepped forward. The others followed suit, their movements slower than before, some still clutching their ribs or wincing from the earlier fight. The air felt heavier now, charged with something far more dangerous than before. This wasn't just about intimidation anymore. This was revenge. Nia sat behind her lemonade stand, her fingers gripping the edges of the wooden counter as her pulse hammered in her ears. She forced herself to remain still, to keep her face neutral. Showing fear would only make them more confident. She had stood up to them once. She would do it again. The bald leader took another step forward, stopping just inches from the stand. His eyes, dark with barely restrained fury, locked onto hers. "You think that was funny?" he asked, his voice lower than before, more dangerous. Nia didn't answer. The biker with the missing front tooth snorted. "A couple of wrestlers show up, rough us up a little, and now you think you're safe?" The leader's eyes flicked toward the money still sitting behind the counter, the same stack of bills that had started everything. His lips curled into a sneer. "We ain't leaving without it this time." Nia swallowed but held her ground. "It's my money," she said firmly. The leader tilted his head as if considering her words. Then his expression twisted into something cruel. "That's the thing, kid. You don't get to decide that." Before she could react, he took another step toward the stand, his hand reaching forward. A massive hand clamped down on his shoulder before he could touch a single bill. "You don't get to decide that either," came a deep, familiar voice. The leader stiffened. Slowly, he turned his head. Dwayne Johnson and John Cena stood behind him. The leader's face twisted in frustration as he jerked his shoulder away from Dwayne's grip. "You two again," he spat. "I should have known." John raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, you should have." The other bikers tensed, their hands flexing into fists, their bodies shifting in preparation. The leader's hands clenched at his sides. "You don't know when to quit, do you?" Dwayne smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We could ask you the same thing." The leader exhaled sharply through his nose, his fury barely restrained. He looked at his men, then back at the two wrestlers. He was weighing his options, and they all knew it. 6 against 2. The numbers were still in his favor, but something about the way Dwayne and John were standing, completely at ease, unbothered by the threat in front of them, made the odds feel a lot different. The leader made his decision. "Get them," he snarled. The moment the words left his mouth, the bikers lunged. The air crackled with energy as fists flew and bodies collided. The first biker to reach them swung a wild punch at John Cena, but John sidestepped effortlessly, catching the man's arm and twisting it behind his back with a sharp yank. With a controlled motion, he flipped the biker over his shoulder, sending him crashing onto the pavement with a heavy thud. Before the man could even groan in pain, John was already moving on to the next attacker. Dwayne caught another biker mid-swing, blocking the punch with ease before grabbing the man by his leather vest and hoisting him off the ground. The biker's eyes widened in shock as Dwayne lifted him effortlessly and slammed him onto the hood of a parked car. The impact left a visible dent in the metal as the man groaned and rolled off onto the ground. The leader snarled and charged at Dwayne with a clenched fist, but Dwayne saw it coming. He sidestepped at the last second, grabbing the biker's arm and twisting it into a tight hold before delivering a devastating elbow to his ribs. The leader let out a grunt of pain, but still tried to fight back, struggling to break free. John, meanwhile, was dealing with two bikers at once. One of them came at him with a rusty chain, swinging it wildly. John ducked under the first swing, then caught the chain mid-air before yanking it forward, causing the biker to stumble toward him. With perfect precision, John planted a boot to the man's chest, sending him flying backward. The other biker rushed in from the side, but John caught him by the arm and threw him into the lemonade stand, knocking over the wooden counter and sending cups flying. Nia gasped, quickly stepping back as the man groaned in pain, tangled in the debris. John glanced at her. "You okay?" She nodded quickly. "Yeah." Dwayne wasn't done with the leader yet. The man tried to land a cheap shot, swinging at Dwayne's face, but Dwayne caught his wrist in midair, squeezing tight. The leader's face twisted in pain as Dwayne tightened his grip. "Still think this is your money?" Dwayne asked, his voice dangerously low. The leader gritted his teeth, refusing to answer. "Didn't think so," Dwayne said. Then, with one swift motion, he spun the man around and slammed him face first into a wooden fence. The leader groaned, sliding down onto the ground in a daze. The remaining bikers, now realizing they were completely outmatched, scrambled to their feet. The man tangled in the lemonade stand pushed himself up, rubbing his head before staggering backward. The others helped each other up, wincing from bruises and aching limbs. John dusted off his hands. "Anyone else?" None of them answered. The leader sat up, groaning as he clutched his ribs. He glared up at Dwayne and John with pure hatred, but there was no fight left in him. He knew it was over. Dwayne crossed his arms. "Take your guys and get out of here." The leader spat on the ground but didn't argue. He knew when he was beaten. He gestured to his men, and one by one they limped toward their motorcycles. Engines roared to life as they mounted their bikes, their bruised pride evident in the way they avoided eye contact. The leader swung his leg over his motorcycle but hesitated. He turned to Nia, his lip curling in frustration. "This isn't over," he muttered. Nia, despite everything, met his glare with steady eyes. "Yeah," she said, "it is." Dwayne smirked at her words while John let out a low chuckle. The leader didn't respond. He revved his engine, and with a final growl of defeat, he and his gang sped off down the street, disappearing into the distance. Silence settled over the scene once more. Nia looked around at her lemonade stand, which was now a mess. Cups were scattered, the wooden frame was broken, and her pitcher had been knocked over completely. She sighed. "Well, there goes my business." John crouched down, picking up one of the fallen signs and setting it back in place. "Nah, you're still in business." Dwayne nodded, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a few crisp bills. "Here, use this to rebuild it." She looked at the money in his hand but shook her head. "You've already given me so much." "This isn't charity," Dwayne said. "Consider it a business investment." John grinned. "We expect a discount next time we stop by." Nia finally smiled, taking the money. "Deal." Dwayne and John helped her clean up what they could, setting things back in order as best as possible. The fight was over, but the lesson lingered. She had stood her ground. She had defended what was hers, and she had found people willing to stand beside her. As they finished, John stretched his arms. "All right, we should probably get moving before we end up in another brawl." Dwayne chuckled. "Agreed." Nia watched as they started to walk away. "Thank you," she called out. John turned and gave her a small salute. "Keep being tough, kid." Dwayne gave her one last nod. "And remember what we said, when it's your turn, pay it forward." She clutched the money in her hands, her eyes full of understanding. "I will." The sun had begun its slow descent, casting long shadows over the quiet street. The park was still filled with families enjoying the evening breeze, and the occasional sound of laughter echoed through the neighborhood. But for Nia, everything felt different. She sat behind what remained of her lemonade stand, still gripping the money Dwayne had handed her. The chaos of the afternoon had settled, leaving only the aftermath, a broken stand, scattered cups, and the memory of what had just taken place. Despite the mess, she didn't feel defeated. If anything, she felt stronger than ever. She carefully tucked the money into a safe spot beneath the counter, her mind racing with possibilities. She could rebuild. She would rebuild. And this time, she would make the stand. Even better, stronger, just like she had become today. Across the street, a few curious neighbors peeked from their windows, having heard the commotion but unwilling to get involved. Now they whispered among themselves, pointing at the girl and the two massive figures jogging away in the distance. Dwayne Johnson and John Cena moved at a steady pace, their breathing even despite everything that had just happened. They didn't need to say much to each other. The fight was over and Nia was safe. That was all that mattered. After a few minutes, John finally spoke. "Think they'll be back?" Dwayne didn't answer right away. He exhaled through his nose, considering. "Maybe," he admitted. "Guys like that don't like losing." John nodded. "But she's not the same scared kid they met earlier." A small smirk crossed Dwayne's face. "No, she's not." They ran a few more steps before John chuckled. "I still can't believe we stopped for lemonade and ended up in a full-blown street fight." Dwayne let out a short laugh. "Yeah, next time maybe we should just buy a bottle of water and keep moving." John shook his head. "Nah, I'd do it again." Dwayne glanced at him. "Yeah, me too." Back at the lemonade stand, Nia took a deep breath and started gathering the scattered cups. It would take some time, but she would fix everything. She had come too far to let a few broken boards and a ruined pitcher stop her now. She adjusted one of the bent signs, pressing it back into place as best she could. The words, "Fresh lemonade, $1, were slightly smudged but still readable. She smiled to herself. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She thought about what Dwayne had said before leaving. When it's your turn, pay it forward. She didn't know when that moment would come, but she knew one thing for sure. When it did, she would be ready. She picked up a clean cup, filled it with the last of her lemonade, and raised it slightly toward the street where Dwayne and John had disappeared. A silent toast, a promise. Then she turned back to her stand and got to work. A year had passed since that unforgettable day at the lemonade stand. The seasons had come and gone, and with them, Nia had grown, not just in age, but in strength, confidence, and purpose. The small lemonade stand that once stood in the neighborhood park had been replaced by something much greater. On the edge of town, near a busy intersection, a brand new building stood tall, its sleek, modern design welcoming anyone who walked through its doors. The large sign above the entrance read, "Nia's Sports Center," and beneath it, in bold letters, "For every athlete." Inside the gym, the sound of wheels rolling across the polished floors mixed with the rhythmic bounce of basketballs and the encouraging voices of trainers and kids. The center was bustling with energy, filled with young athletes, some in wheelchairs, others on crutches, some with prosthetic limbs, and many more who simply wanted a place to belong. For the first time, kids with physical challenges had a space built just for them, where they could train, compete, and prove that their abilities were just as strong as anyone else's. At the center of it all, Nia sat in her wheelchair watching with pride as a group of kids practiced dribbling on the court. Her eyes sparkled as she saw a young boy in a wheelchair make his first basket, his arms shooting into the air with pure joy. She smiled, knowing exactly what that moment felt like. She had done it. The money she had received from Dwayne Johnson and John Cena had been the beginning, but she had worked even harder afterward, determined to make their investment worth it. She had started a campaign, reaching out to local businesses, organizing community fundraisers, and speaking at events about her dream. People had listened. More donations had poured in, and before she knew it, she had the backing she needed to turn her dream into reality. On the far wall of the gym, a large framed photograph hung for everyone to see. It was a picture of her father, smiling in his basketball jersey, his arm draped around a younger Nia. Below the photo, engraved in metal, was the quote he had always told her: "Impossible is just a word." The doors to the center swung open, and two familiar figures stepped inside. Dwayne Johnson and John Cena walked onto the basketball court, their eyes scanning the gym with approval. They had heard the news, seen the articles about what Nia had accomplished, but now, standing in the middle of it, they could see firsthand what their small act of kindness had helped build. Nia turned her wheelchair toward them, grinning. "Took you guys long enough." Dwayne let out a deep laugh. Yeah, we wanted to see if you actually made something out of that investment." John glanced around, nodding. "Looks like she did." Nia gestured toward the gym. "Welcome to the place where excuses don't exist." Dwayne folded his arms. "I love it. So, what's the deal? We just here for the grand tour, or do we get to see you in action?" She smirked. "Actually, I was about to start tryouts for our wheelchair basketball team. You guys interested?" John grinned. "I don't know. I've seen your defense. I might not be ready for this level of competition." Dwayne nodded. "Yeah, and I'm not trying to get dunked on by an 11-year-old. Nia laughed. "Then maybe I'll let you guys start with some lemonade instead." She wheeled over to a small counter set up in the corner of the gym, where a new lemonade stand stood, just like the one from a year ago. A fresh pitcher sat on the table, cups stacked neatly beside it. Dwayne and John exchanged amused looks before stepping up to the counter. "How much?" Dwayne asked. Nia tapped her chin, pretending to think. "For you guys? I think I can give a small discount." John took a cup and lifted it in a toast. "To the toughest kid we've ever met." Dwayne lifted his cup as well, and to paying it forward. Nia clinked her cup against theirs. They drank. The future was bright, and this was only the beginning. Sometimes the smallest stand can hold the greatest strength. What started as a simple lemonade business turned into a fight for dignity, courage, and justice. But one lesson remains. When you stand your ground, the right people will stand with you. What would you have done in this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more inspiring stories.